afternoon. It's not often I feel like I take the stage and have a remarkable hurdle to clear. Those remarks by Travis were amongst the best I've heard at any of these events here in Central New York, and we are really grateful for his willingness to come and share his message with us. Proud to have him as an alum of this region and eager to continue to engage he, Alphabet, Google, and all their many innovative concepts and ideas as partners in the work that we do. Please give one more round of applause for Travis Mason. Before we begin, just a few thank yous. First, to our incredible staff at CenterState CEO who worked so hard not only to put this event together with all of you, but throughout the year to work on the issues that you care about, to bring value to our members, and to focus on how we can make this community a better place to live. To all of you at CenterState CEO, thank you for what you do day in and day out. Also here with us today, Congressman John Katko. And for those of you who may not have heard, I'd like to recognize the Congressman. Not only has he been a really tremendous partner for us and CenterState CEO in his time here, but was also recently awarded the U.S. Chamber's Spirit of Enterprise Award for supporting issues of importance to the business community. Congressman, we thank you for your leadership and your work, and thank you for joining us today. To the chairman of our board of directors, Deborah Stanley, who will get a significant portion of her life back later this year, next month actually, when she completes her final term in that role. Deborah has provided invaluable support to our organization and to me personally, has pushed me, encouraged me, and challenged me in ways that have helped me grow. Deborah, I and the organization and our entire community are grateful to you and thank you for your support. And a final thank you to my wife, Corinne, who's here today. The last year has been, in many respects, an intense roller coaster full of challenge and opportunity. No one is subjected to more of that madness than my wife, and without her, I'd simply be lost. Thank you, I love you, and I appreciate everything you do. What we just heard from Travis could not have been more timely or poignant for this region. You heard him speak to his own personal experience and that of Google, where there is a focus on continuous innovation, always experimenting, never satisfied with the status quo, and constantly looking for new ways to identify, build, and nurture a competitive advantage. For those who wonder why we've chosen such a provocative theme for this year's meeting, cities and regions are no different than companies in that regard. We face changing circumstances, unexpected challenges, and competition from other places. We have to make decisions about how we respond to those external forces. Are we proactive, or do we cling to what's safe and comfortable? Do we resist? The answer to that question often comes down to whether or not we truly understand and accept that change is needed. So let's talk openly for a moment about our region's status quo. Data released last month shows that among the nation's 104 largest metro areas, just 13 lost population in the last 2 years, including Syracuse. In fact, the population in Onondaga County has not changed since 1970, a 46-year period of stagnation during which the population of New York State grew 8%, and the population of our country grew 55%. The trends for the city of Syracuse look even worse. In 1920, Syracuse ranked 37th on the list of largest cities in America, with nearly 300,000 people. By 1970, we had slipped to 66th, and today we rank as the 175th largest city in America, just behind Savannah, Georgia, and just ahead of Dayton, Ohio. Our economy has been similarly anemic. Since 1990, the economy of the U.S. grew 121%, and yet there are 26,000 fewer people employed in Onondaga County today than there were 25 years ago. Not only has job growth lagged, but our workers earn 11% less for the same day's work. Since we're not growing, our homes are worth less than the national average. And adjusted for inflation, the single largest investment that many of us make in our lives actually lost value over the last 3 years. To make matters worse, we haven't just been failing to grow, but we have in fact been growing more and more unequal. Right now, more than a third of Syracuse's residents live below the poverty level, ranking us as the 23rd poorest city in America. Half of Syracuse's children live in poverty. In Oswego County, that number is 28%, still more than 50% above the national average. And while the challenges of economic segregation can be felt by communities across this entire region, they are felt most viscerally by the minority population in the city of Syracuse, where 43.7% of the African American population and 50% of the Hispanic population live in concentrated poverty, earning our city, the brand that we promote to the rest of the world, the dubious distinction of having the highest concentration of poverty among minority populations of any city in America. A lack of proximity and accessibility to jobs adds insult to injury. The average commute for the majority of city residents that use public transportation is more than 30 minutes, compared to the rest of the region, whose commute times of 21 minutes, which means we're actually making it harder for people living in poverty to get and keep a job. Now, recently, we've read several letters to the editor from people questioning why they should care about the economic and fiscal challenges facing our city, preferring instead to ignore the very fact that the economic condition of our city is central to the economic condition of our region. As Bill Hudnut, the former mayor of Indianapolis, once said, "You can't be a suburb of nothing." But right now, our city is not healthy. When Mayor Miner first took office, she rightly rang the bell to draw attention to the fiscal stresses facing Syracuse. Without action, she said, the city could face insolvency before the end of her term. And despite several politically difficult decisions to cut costs, a one-time advance of $21 million in state aid to municipalities, and a collaboratively developed, unanimously approved sales tax sharing formula that has dramatically increased revenues to the city of Syracuse, the city will close the current fiscal year with a mere $44 million in reserves, after having spent $25 million more this year than it took in. The current trajectory is simply not sustainable. Now, to be fair, these economic, demographic, and fiscal pressures are not unique to the city of Syracuse. The findings of the Consensus Commission on Government Modernization highlight for us that 18 of the 35 towns and villages in Onondaga County lost population between 2000 and 2010. And 20 will face a point of fiscal stress in the next decade if meaningful steps aren't taken to reduce spending. That's not a scare tactic, that's math. Our current system of local government, which consists of 36 municipalities, 57 fire departments, 26 school districts, and 212 independently elected officials, perpetuates a culture of fragmentation and parochialism that divides us, despite the fact that we are truly one interdependent community, where 82% of suburban residents work in a different municipality than where they live, many commuting to the city where our largest employers and economic engines are based. Ladies and gentlemen, this is our status quo in this region. These statistics tell a story of a place that, for lack of a better term, is stuck in time. Yes, there have been some extremely encouraging developments over the last few years, the rebirth of downtown, a cleaner Onondaga Lake, but we cannot ignore the fact that this region hasn't grown appreciably in more than 40 years. And yet, presented with these glaring facts and a wide range of exciting opportunities, including a $500 million investment via the Upstate Revitalization Initiative, our civic discourse has descended to the lowest point that I can recall since returning to Syracuse 13 years ago. The pessimism and distrust that too often holds us back has been on full display. A once-in-a-generation investment by the state in our region is dubbed contributor capitalism by those that seek to delegitimize it. A decades-long quest to build a waterfront neighborhood at the Inner Harbor is ground to a halt by lawsuits. A plan to redevelop an abandoned rock quarry into a modern rail-served transportation and logistics hub that could create hundreds, if not thousands, of jobs is almost immediately assailed by an active and well-resourced campaign to stop it. And the very motivations of 19 highly respected volunteers from across our community who have worked openly and transparently for more than 24 months to help us reform local governments in Onondaga County based on a simple premise that we can do better than we are today have been called into question. Labeled as a right-wing conspiracy for the county to take over the city, a liberal plan to make the suburbs pay for the city's debt, and my favorite, I kid you not, a leftist intellectual effort to do away with private property rights and take away people's guns. It's not a joke. Friends, these are reactions based on fear, not on hope, on cynicism, not on strategy. Now, any healthy debate will draw out policy differences, but policy differences can be worked out. What we're seeing today is something different. It's less policy difference than it is political differences, intended to pit neighbor against neighbor and turn our focus away from our shared goals and opportunities. Now, as County Executive Mahoney rightly pointed out in her State of the County address, for many in our community, the default switch is set to no. Now, Travis reminds us rightly that not all change is growth, and not all movement is forward. But no is not a strategy either. No is not a vision. No is not a path forward. No is a hole in the ground into which we put our heads when we want to ignore reality. Now, there's an interesting body of research that I came across recently as I was struggling to understand why this community is so rabidly resistant to change. It's called system justification. Essentially, the study of why people cling to the status quo and sometimes vociferously defend broken systems that they know all too well are failing them. They do so under 4 conditions: when a system they're comfortable with is threatened, when they're dependent on that system, when they feel as if they can't escape the system, and when they feel as if they have little control over the outcomes. Taken in that context, our community's reaction sometimes makes sense. Our system is threatened. Not only is our economy being left behind the rest of the world, but our system of governance is threatened by massive fiscal pressures. And while that system may not be performing well as a whole, many depend on it, either because the system is biased in their favor or because the system provides whatever few supports and services they receive. So we defend a system that is failing us. We argue that the current system works fine. We suggest that a majority of people like things just the way they are. We acknowledge that some change might be necessary, but that the options presented aren't good enough, all the while failing to offer a single concrete idea of our own. Or we question the motives of those proposing change. Sound familiar? I stand here today to ask you one question. Does our community have the appetite to disrupt this cycle, this system of economic stagnation, or don't we? 10 years ago, another upstate New York city found itself at a similar crossroads. Buffalo, forgotten by industry, abandoned by an entire generation, saddled with a municipal control board, and now today, Buffalo is on the rise. I spent enough time over the last year with Howard Zemsky, the chairman and CEO of Empire State Development Corporation, to be able to give his speech about the Buffalo Billion for him. The biggest factor in Buffalo's turnaround wasn't the money, he says, but rather the willingness and commitment of the state to invest and place value in the community. Despite all of the hardships of the last several decades and the challenges we currently face, the state of New York is now invested in our success. Our elected officials will be viewed as successful if we are successful. And that state commitment has already supported new investments in this region. An LED manufacturer, Sora, has pledged to create hundreds of high-tech jobs that will be a boost to our economy. The state has agreed to invest $20 million in Say Yes to Education, fulfilling an 8-year quest to create a permanently endowed scholarship program, giving every child in the city of Syracuse who graduates from high school a chance now and in perpetuity to go to college for free. Companies from around the world, including Google, are taking notice of the investment that New York State is making in unmanned systems, and exciting announcements are just around the corner. We're innovating in one of our state's historic industry strengths, agriculture, by working to extend the growing season for our crops and the shelf life for our products. The Alliance for Economic Inclusion is taking shape to advance our goals to create greater economic opportunity, increased wealth, and improved quality of life within our distressed communities. And in just a few weeks, an environmental review of a nearly dozen sites across this region will be released to offer insight into where an inland port can generate the greatest economic impact. Not only can this project lower costs for central New York manufacturers and agricultural producers, but if sited properly, it can create jobs close to the people who need them the most. Because we will not disrupt the depth of poverty and economic segregation in this community until we acknowledge that the geography of jobs matters. Now, these projects are just the tip of the iceberg. Investments in industries, new and old, that can build momentum, change attitudes, and re-energize our region. And yet the opportunities to disrupt our status quo go far beyond the Upstate Revitalization Initiative. A decision over the future of Interstate 81 is drawing near. For nearly 60 years, that interstate has created a barrier between the two most significant areas of growth and investment in our community and depressed property values in the heart of our business district. Today, young people are driving less and moving to cities in search of vitality and place. And with major investments at the State Fair, a cleaner Onondaga Lake, the development of the Inner Harbor, growth of Destiny, the rebirth of downtown, and the continued expansion of University Hill, there is a growing opportunity to transform this city, not with a new and wider highway system, but with a vibrant street grid and a modern transit system that actually takes people where they want to go, be it the Dome or downtown, the amphitheater, or the airport. And then there is consensus. What if instead of talking about the continued decline of the 175th largest city in America, we could envision metropolitan Syracuse, a new and modern government formed by our city and county, towns and villages that embrace the values of better government, economic growth, and equitable representation for all. Overnight, that new city would become the second largest in New York State and the 38th largest in the United States, reclaiming a position we held nearly 100 years ago. Now that is a strategy. It's a vision, a path forward. Think about how that would change the very way we look at ourselves, not as a place that can't, but as a modern, creative, innovative, progressive, and successful place that can. Now, I close my eyes at night, and that is the future that I see. It's the one that I want for my family and, most importantly, for my son, Benjamin. Now, you've all watched him grow each year at this event. In 2 weeks, he turns 4. People sometimes ask me why I choose to put him up on the screen each year, and it's simple. This isn't a job to me. It's a passion. And seeing him grow is a reminder of why I'm so passionate about the future of this community. That is the reason not to stop, to get up, to push, to provoke, to carry the message of the private sector, Travis's message and your message of continuous improvement and innovation into our civic life. The opportunities to make this region a place where our children and families can find jobs, homes, and create the kind of lives that we want for them are right in front of us. So close we can almost touch them. But we cannot be afraid to rock the boat a little bit in the process of getting there. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. I appreciate all of your support and everything you do, not only for CenterState CEO, but for this entire region. We are forever in your gratitude. Thank you.